you just want to make sure that you go in with your eyes wide open. And the first basic is that bookkeeping, what's the spending plan? What are you going to spend money on in retirement? How much is it going to cost?
That is the most crucial thing, because as you know, the silent wealth eroding factor is inflation, and that's built on your expenses. Is that the inflation is going to have a much bigger impact the larger your budget is in retirement.
Starting your route to retirement.
Welcome to the Guided Retirement Show. I'm your host, Dean Barber. Back with me today for the fifth time is Chris Rett. He's a certified financial planner. This is the season finale for season number 9 and also episode 101. So Chris and I are going to take you back to the basics, Retirement 101. Please enjoy my conversation with Chris Rett, certified financial planner. All right, Chris Rett, certified financial planner, back for your fifth time here on the Guided Retirement Show. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Dean. Thanks for having me.
And this is a special episode. It is episode 101. It's the season finale of season 9. So I thought since this was episode 101, we would kind of do Retirement 101 and get back to the basics.
Sure.
So from the eyes of a certified financial planner, let's talk about the basics.
Sure.
And what do people need to know? And I think it's the basics of how to build that retirement plan successfully.
Yeah, I think it's always good to get back to the basics. I think you never want to lose sight of the basics, because that's what more than likely got you where you're at in the first place. So even if you're hearing this for the first time or the 101st time, right, is that this is something that you always want to go back to the basics every year. And so what we've done today is it's a little cheesy, but I think it helps, is come up with an acronym to cover all the basics when you're looking at retirement planning 101.
Yeah, you got this kind of tongue in cheek here. You want a BRITE
Retirement. Yeah,
but you spelled it wrong. You spelled it BRITE.
I did, yeah.
I know in today's world, you could probably look that up on Wikipedia or something, so you're going to get some definition.
Exactly.
But it's just an acronym.
It is just an acronym. Yep. And it's meant to cover the financials of it, the risk management, the insurance, the investments, the taxes, and the estate planning. Sort of what our 4 pillars cover, just with an extra vowel. Right.
So your financials, accounting, and cash flows, that's you're calling bookkeeping. So that's your B.
Yep.
Risk management is your R.
Yep.
Investing is your I.
Yep.
And then taxes are the T, and E is estate planning.
That's it. Yep. If you cover all those, you have the basics covered for a retirement plan.
Okay, so let's start with this idea of bookkeeping or accounting or financials.
Yep.
I know from the perspective of the 37 years that 37 years, that I've been doing this, that when people get closer to retirement, they typically are in their peak earning years. Mm-hmm. The idea of a budget has gone out the window because they're not spending all of what they make, so they don't feel the need to budget anymore. Yeah. But a very basic thing for a retirement plan to be solid is a budget. And if you don't want to call it a budget, maybe you call it a spending plan.
Absolutely.
What do I plan to spend in retirement, and on what?
Yep. No, exactly. Call it whatever you want. At the end of the day, you and then the financial advisor, hopefully that you're working with, needs to know what to anticipate for monthly expenses. And some of those can be unanticipated, right? Is that at some point the car is going to break down, the roof is going to leak. These are things that you do have to plan for. But you're exactly right, is that your peak earning years, it's kind of, hey, we tend to save what's ever left over rather than, looking at what we actually spend. Because I know you and I both know, you sit in those meetings and somebody's like, I think this is what I spend. And then you say, hey, a real quick, do you put everything on credit card or debit card? You run the expense report and they're like, I had no idea that's how much I was spending.
Yeah.
And so the point of that is, to your point, is that it's okay to spend that. It's just you need to know that's how much you're spending.
Yeah. It's just a really, really quick story. This has been years and years ago. I had a couple says, "Hey, they came in and they said, well, we're retiring in 6 months." And I'm like, "Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
let's make sure that everything's in order. And they're like, well, we're retiring in 6 months. And I'm like, well, let's make sure that you have enough.
Sure.
Right. And so we got into this whole idea of spending or the budget, and it's really critical. And I asked them, how much money are you spending on a monthly basis today? Okay, Dean, we're spending $5,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And how much money do you have saved? We got about $1 million all in our 401k plans. All right. And so I'm figuring, okay, you're spending $5,000 a month. Both are going to qualify for Social Security. They're at Social Security age. And, with a reasonable withdrawal, that should work.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well,
simple math.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty simple math, right? Mm-hmm. And so I went through and I said, okay, so let's take a look at your last 2 years worth of tax returns. So I look at the tax returns, and I could tell from the tax returns that they were netting $10,000 a month after taxes.
Yep.
And so I said, you guys are bringing home $10,000 a month after taxes. Do you have any money saved anywhere besides your 401k? No, that's it.
Yep.
I said, where's the other $5,000 a month going that you say you're not spending?
Right.
And it was like dead silence. And
Yeah.
they look at each other and they're like, are we really spending $10,000 a month? And I said, well, that's how much you're bringing home.
Right.
If you're not saving anything, and if you haven't been aggressively paying off debt, that's what you're spending.
Going somewhere. Yep.
And I said, so if you're going to retire in 6 months, you're going to have to cut your expenses pretty significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Right.
And she starts crying. They didn't, and I didn't want to sugarcoat it.
No. It's better to do it that way. And that's the thing too, is we're advocates for them.
Right.
It's not mom and dad telling you, here's your allowance. It is.
You just want to make sure that you go in with your eyes wide open. And the first basic is that bookkeeping, what's the spending plan? What are you going to spend money on in retirement? How much is it going to cost?
That is the most crucial thing, because as you know, the silent wealth eroding factor is inflation, and that's built on your expenses.
Yeah.
Is that the inflation is going to have a much bigger impact the larger your budget is in retirement.
Okay, so once we've got that spending plan together, the bookkeeping part of it, the B,
Yeah.
we now go to the.
Well, I think too, the second part of that too is the income, right? Is what income sources do you have?
Right. Well, there may be Social Security, there may be pensions, there may be rental income, farm income, et cetera. But those are your resources, right?
Exactly.
Spending plan measured against the resources.
Yep.
But I think before you get to measuring against the resources, you have to cover the risk management, and the risk management is insurance. And so if I go all the way back to the very early part of my career,
Mm-hmm.
and look at the basic foundation of financial planning. Foundation is, first of all, you have to have proper risk management.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
In other words, you have to have the right insurance for all things that could potentially go wrong, whether it's health, whether it's disability, whether it's long-term care, whether it's life insurance, whether it's property casualty insurance. A good foundation of the right insurance prevents catastrophic loss.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so that I think is really, really, nobody really likes to talk about insurance.
Yep.
In fact, a lot of people think that insurance is just another 4-letter word.
Sure.
And the reality is, when you think about insurance, nobody ever goes and buys insurance and they turn to their spouse and say, I can't wait till we file a claim on this policy.
I know it. Yep. Nope. That's exactly right.
They don't want to file a claim. You get it to manage the risk. You're transferring that risk
to the
from
insurance.
you to the insurance company.
Yep. Nope. That's exactly right. And that's the thing too, is that you don't want to have some of these catastrophic events without insurance. It's hard enough when you have it insured. It gets monumentally harder when you don't have that insurance. And so the primary one, like you talked about with retirement planning, is going to be your life insurance, your health insurance, and your potential long-term care insurance, if not having a plan. And so a lot of times people carry life insurance all the way up to retirement because they're providing for a family. If something happens to them, they want to make sure their wife and kids. But when you start to retire, maybe the house is paid off. Maybe the kids are out of the house and they're self-sufficient. Is that the idea of carrying life insurance is it does have a place, but now it has to be much more intentional than it was 20, 30 years prior when you as you mentioned, built that foundation.
Well, and there's different ways to think about life insurance as you head into retirement.
Absolutely.
All right. So as an example, you may have somebody, and I'll just use an example that they've saved $1 million. Okay. It's just a round figure.
Absolutely.
And they want to make sure that they leave that $1 million to their 2 children. Okay. So, but they also want to be able to live a lifestyle where they can do the things that they want to do. All right. So the question at that point would be, if we could go out and purchase a life insurance policy that was $1 million that paid tax-free to the 2 children at the death of the second spouse, you know what that allows that couple to do? Spend the entire $1 million, not just the interest on it, because it's not like we're trying to preserve that. We just want to make sure that the kids get $1 million.
That's exactly right.
So you can utilize insurance in such a way in retirement where you can actually spend more than what you thought was possible.
And the opposite is true too, is that how many times do we utilize life insurance to cover the tax bill when a spouse passes away prematurely?
Yeah, you could use that insurance to do a big Roth conversion, or you could use that insurance to buoy up the estate in the event that one or the other had to go into long-term care and it ate up some of the ability for that surviving spouse to live the way they want to live. There's a number of different ways, but risk management and insurance is critical, and it's not just something you need as a young couple. It's something you really have to analyze, and does it fit into your overall retirement plan or not?
Nope, that's exactly right. And that's an extension to, I would say, healthcare and Medicare, is that if somebody's retiring prior to Medicare, it's those gap years that a lot of times clients and potential clients come to us and say, you know, it's really these gap years that I'm kind of done retiring. I've done the financials. You know, I think I can retire on paper, but I just don't have a plan in place for healthcare.
And that's a big one, because healthcare is increasing at a much faster rate than core inflation is. And so when we're building out that financial plan for someone heading into retirement, we're always accelerating the cost of healthcare far greater than what we're accelerating the cost of, you know, just the normal, you know, goods and services that you would purchase through an annual basis.
Absolutely. And I think it's also worth noting too, is that to cover insurance personally or individually when you're not working for an employer, I think it's eye-popping for a lot of people how much that potentially could cost, you know. And so that's why it does make sense to have a plan in place, if not work with somebody that can put a plan in place, a much more affordable option for you.
Yeah. Well, and you can, if you structure it properly and you retire before Medicare, if you've done good job on the T part of this, the tax part, and we've created good tax diversification, we can qualify for ACA credits by keeping our taxable income below a certain level, therefore making that insurance pre-Medicare affordable.
Exactly. Nope. That's exactly right. And that's why it is tough. The acronym doesn't exactly work out all the time, because taxes and healthcare are so intertwined. I mean, we see this all the time with Roth conversions, is how many people, you know, potentially Roth converted on their own, and, you know, a year and a half later they get hit with an IRMA, you know. Is that tax planning and healthcare, you wouldn't think about it, but it is so intertwined, is that one has a very big impact on the other.
And estate planning is intertwined in that as well.
It is. Yep.
They all kind of commingle together, which is why it's important, you know, when we say going back to the basics, but it's important that you have the proper subject matter experts, the estate experts, the tax experts, the financial planning expert, that you have to have that expertise. And it should really, in my opinion, it should be a team of these professionals that are working on behalf of the individual to build out this plan.
No, I actually sat in a meeting today with somebody that was interested in interviewing us to hire us to be their financial advocate, right? And so it was interesting, as we're covering these basics and we're going over the 4 pillars, he quickly became overwhelmed. He's like, I had no idea there was this much here. And I looked at him, and to your point, I said, you can, you know, as the CFO of your household, you can go out and hire each of these individuals and hope that they get along together and speak the same language and have have the same North Star heading in the same direction. Or, you know, we've done it for you. We've collaborated, and we've built that team, and now you just have to go to one place.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense.
It does. And
especially as people head into retirement, this is one of the things, I know this is a basic 101 thing, but our cognitive ability is in decline when we're in retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to have a team that understands your objectives is really, really critical.
Absolutely. Yep. Because, and that's another, you could file under risk management, if you would, that doesn't show up on a report or doesn't, there's not a premium for that, but it is having that continuity plan in the event that something happens to you unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Where does your spouse go? Where do your kids go? How's everything? There has been a plan made. How do you execute on that plan? And that's having that team in your absence.
Yeah, drawing up a game plan unless you're going to execute it doesn't do you any.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to the letter I. So remember, we're talking about BRITE, B-R-I-T-E. We did bookkeeping, budgeting. That's the B. We do our risk management. I is the investments.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me when we get to investments is most people, when you say, hey, I'm a financial advisor, they think you're some kind of a stock jockey, investment guru, right?
Absolutely.
And the reality is that to design the right portfolio for somebody, we can't even begin to design a portfolio until we've built out the entire plan, and then we discover what the money actually needs to do. Then we can begin to build out the portfolio. So we're not going to talk about how to design a portfolio today because it's individualized for each person.
Yeah.
What we want to talk about are some of the things that people should consider, or some of the things that you think are the basics on investing.
Yeah, no. And the way this is set out, it just kind of worked out this way, is the order is that would be the third tier anyways. If we're looking at basically a hierarchy of needs, is you would want to have that plan or those expenses, and then what risk managers do you have, right? The insurance. Then that third level is investment planning, because it is dependent on what the situation is and the person.
What are your resources, and what do those resources need to do?
Yeah, because we put in there risk comfortability versus capacity. Is that somebody might be, not very comfortable with taking a ton of risk, but their portfolio needs to kind of have a certain amount of market returns over the longevity of their plan in order to be successful. And this doesn't mean making them uncomfortable. It means just having that honest conversation with them to say, hey, where you're comfortable doesn't match what, the portfolio in essence needs, and vice versa. Is how many times do we, sit down with clients and prospects and say, you're way too aggressive. And they're like, I know, right? It's been great. And in a bull market like we had over the last 10 years, it's worked out great. But as you start inching and in retirement, the sequence of returns can be an ugly friend. I mean, you and I have talked about this before at your previous, life earlier in your career, is just how sequence of returns can really have a negative effect.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris, because Bud Casper, the managing director of our Lease Summit office, and we did on a recent episode of America's Wealth Management Show, we talked about the 4% rule. And here in 2023, Morningstar actually did a brand new report, and they revised that 4% rule back up to 4%, because in 2021, they suggested a 3.3% withdrawal rate, and then they suggested a 3.8% withdrawal rate in 2022. Now, with interest rates being higher, bond values back at a more normal level, now they're saying 4% is again a safe withdrawal rate. But the most interesting thing in that study, there's a lot of really cool stuff in there, but it showed the mix of stocks and bonds to get to that optimum 4% withdrawal, and it was only a 40% equity exposure and a 60% fixed income exposure that actually allowed for the 4% withdrawal. The more equity exposure you got into that portfolio in retirement, the lower the safe withdrawal percentage became. So some people may be confused and think, well, if I can put more in stocks and get better long-term returns, I can withdraw more. But the problem is the sequence of returns isn't consistent enough, and you run the risk of having a bear market that destroys your ability to do what you want to do. So that's why you have to be a little bit more conservative in retirement.
Yeah, no. We've seen that time and time again, that same 4% rule in the 90s. Fantastic, right? Probably the person that by the time they got to 2000, they've been retired for 10 years. They might have doubled their money.
Yeah.
They start off with. Same person and retires in 2000, they might be back to work in 2010.
Exactly.
His sequence of returns works for you when the market's up, but it works equally against you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Chris, because a person could have retired in 1990 with 60% equities and 40% fixed income. And through, the decade of the 90s, they could have been taking out 4%. And you're right. They probably would have doubled their money, maybe a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Another person retiring January 1st of 2000 with a 60-40 portfolio is running the risk of running out of money.
Yeah.
Because of the losses in the early years, and then you had the 2008 financial crisis on top of that, right?
Absolutely.
You basically had a lost decade in the market.
Exactly. Yep. While you're spending 4%.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you and I both know that yields weren't high enough to support that.
No, that's only been a recent phenomenon, which to your point has been great. So I think, we cover that pretty well, is that just having that, idea of what the portfolio needs is that we talk about all the time is we want to create an investment strategy that takes the least amount of risk necessary to achieve your goals. And I think a lot of people are kind of, it opens their eyes that they've probably been a little too risky, again, not knowing.
Yeah. No, I agree. So we talk about risk exposure. When we talk about risk exposure or risk capacity or comfortability,
yep.
What I always think about is how do I build a portfolio that can accomplish my long-term objectives with the least amount of risk possible?
Absolutely.
Right. So in other words, if somebody could retire and they could go out and buy a 30-year treasury at 8%, right, then where's your risk?
Yeah.
Right. And I'm only spending 4%, so I got an extra 4% growing every single year. I'm keeping up with inflation. It's a great thing.
It is.
That doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, no, it doesn't. And we would be out of a job too, probably. But no, you hit the nail on the head, is that a lot of times it is understanding your risk capacity and, your risk comfortability, because said the opposite too, is that how many clients do you know that, once you kind of tailor the risk down to what they're comfortable with, the phone stop ringing as much every time there's a correction in the market, because they're not feeling it as much.
Right. Well, and they're confident knowing that they've seen it stress tested and they know that it can work through all market cycles.
Nope. Exactly.
That's the key.
Yep.
All right. So the largest wealth eroding factor facing people in retirement is the T, taxes. And fortunately, in retirement, you have a unique ability to control your taxes, unlike during your working years.
Yep.
And so this is where I think having a CPA on the same team as the CFP really makes the difference, because you can reduce that long-term tax burden by 6 figures in most cases. I mean, you see the numbers. You're sitting in that chair as the certified financial planner, working on plan after plan, week after week. And when you put that tax planning in there and you start creating a long-term tax strategy, 100,000, 150, 200, 250,000 in tax savings over that retirement lifetime, that's money that you can spend.
Absolutely.
Or that you can give to your kids, or you can give to charity or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we focus just on asset allocation. You and Bud have been beating the drum for years, which you got to give credit to you guys. It's more about tax diversification, more so than asset allocation.
Because you can control the tax diversification, but you need to start building that tax diversification before you retire. Now, if you haven't built it before you retire, it's not too late. It's just more difficult.
It is. Yep. That's
and
exactly
it's not quite as effective, but it still makes a difference.
It still makes a big difference, because just like you said, when it comes to healthcare and government subsidized healthcare, is that if all you have is IRA money and your budget is a certain amount, and you have to take that out to pay your bills, and you're waiting on Social Security, you don't have a lot of options.
What I call you painted yourself into a ugly tax corner.
That's a great way of putting it.
Really can't get out of.
Because that's exactly what it is that you're limited to what the government is going to pay on taxes, and given the deficit and where we're at, it's.
So I would say this, Chris, if anybody's watching us on YouTube or they're listening to us on the podcast, if you know younger people that are in their saving mode for retirement, send them the link to this show, because it's critical as they save, even early on, that they're creating tax diversification early on. Mm-hmm. Don't wait until you're 5 years out from retirement to start building that tax diversification. You need to start that early on.
No, and I'm starting to have that conversation more and more with clients. I'm sure you are too, where they're looking at their grandkids and they're like, man, I wish I would have known this when I was their age.
Right.
Would you help them? And it is a family affair, is that, we want to help the younger generation, so that way when they get to grandma and grandpa's age is that they've done it right.
I think the biggest part of the difficulty for people with tax diversification is there's a dirty 2-letter word that doesn't make its way into a 2-word phrase, that doesn't make its way into our vernacular very often, and it's called delayed gratification.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep.
So people might be looking at, well, if I put my money into the pre-tax traditional side of the 401k or a traditional IRA, I'm making an immediate tax savings. What you're missing is the rules when you go to get the money out. Right. And if you can put money in at a young age into the Roth and it accumulates tax deferred and then distributes tax free forever, you're going to be way better off.
Exactly. Yep. And I've sat in a lot of meetings with our director of tax, Corey. I know you have too. Yeah. And he's very upfront, is like, you're not going to like me the next couple of years, but I promise you, if Congress does nothing and taxes go up, you're going to wish you did more.
Yeah. You're going to love me.
Yeah, exactly. And so Corey, to his credit, has delayed, appreciation from our clients in a sense, and they understand what's going on. So it's said in jest, but you're exactly right, is that pain of paying the taxes today is that we're not shy, is that we're not creating tax savings today. We're creating tax savings over the longevity of your plan.
Right, because the fact of the matter is that as long as you live in the United States and either have money or make money, taxes are going to be a factor of your life. So you should never be asking the question, how do I pay as little in taxes this year? You should always be asking the question, how do I pay as little over my lifetime?
Well, that's just it. It's another hedge play, right? Is that at the end of the day, what's the reason you get insurance? To hedge against a catastrophic event. You invest in stocks to hedge against inflation. You Roth convert or donate to charity as a hedge against future tax rate increases.
Right. Or even just to grow into a tax-free area, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
If I could have everything in a Roth, I would. But I can't.
Well, that's just it too, is that how nice, how many times do we sit in meetings too with clients and they're like, I just want Uncle Sam out. Is that
everybody does.
Yeah. Is that the messaging is getting out, is that younger and younger clients are coming to us, and to their credit is RMD age has been extended enough times that they're saying, by RMD age, I want my RMD to be 0.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yep.
But that takes a plan.
It does take a plan.
All right,
and executing on the plan.
Let's talk about the last part here, the E, the estate planning. When you talk about estate planning, the very basics of estate planning is making sure that you have a document in place that will dictate how you want your affairs run if you become incapable of making decisions, and how you want your estate to pass to the next generation. What rules do you want in place? And then you start going and appointing successor trustees. You appoint guardians, etc. The estate planning is really it's a critical piece for your surviving family members.
Absolutely.
It's not for you.
It's not. No, it's kind of like life insurance. Is
Right.
You pay the premium, you don't get any of the benefit. Yep.
Yep. So, I've witnessed people who thought they had it all together and they didn't, and the estate settlement portion process was a disaster for either a surviving spouse or the children that were inheriting. And then I've seen people who actually were diligent enough and took the time and were willing to talk about their own mortality and create an estate plan so that their loved ones didn't have to worry about the money part of it when they really should just be grieving.
No, that's exactly right. Is that and we've seen it all, Dean, and especially you in your great career. Me, not as much, but still to a certain degree. Is how many times does money kind of interrupt a loving family because there wasn't a plan in place, and kids are kind of left to interpret, what's left over. It's not a fun conversation.
It happens all the time, Chris. And then there's also your living will, right? That says, here's my wishes in the event that it doesn't look like I'm going to make it.
Sure.
Do I want to be on life support? Do I not want to be on life support? What measures need to be used? Healthcare powers of attorney, financial powers of attorney. That's all part of the estate planning process.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because and this is, my wife is a nurse and she sees it all the time, is that when the family is distressed, that's, it's tough to make a judgment call on what their wishes would have been. It's nice to have that done ahead of time. Or if a medical bill comes up and dad's incapacitated, but he doesn't have financial power of attorney, is I'm writing that check or I'm spending that out of my money, and I know he's good for it, but at the same time, having that financial power of attorney, now you can go to the bank and say, hey, I need to take out $10,000 to cover dad's unexpected hospital stay.
Yeah. Well, and all these things, I think this was a good program here since it's the 101st episode, just kind of get back to the basics. The basics are the basics, but it's still complex.
It is.
Because everything's so intertwined. The decision in one area can affect another area.
Sure can.
That's where having the financial plan put together, working with a CFP and the CPA and the estate planning and risk management experts can allow you to actually step back and become the CEO of your own retirement.
Exactly.
You're the boss.
Yep.
It's your money. It's your vision of what you want your life to look like. But I've never met a successful CEO who also tried to be the chief legal counsel, who also tried to be the chief tax counsel, who also tried to be the chief risk counsel.
Yeah.
They can't do it all.
Yeah. There's a famous story with Henry Ford in the book Think and Grow Rich. I don't know if you've read it, but it's highly recommended. And it talks about everybody thought that Henry Ford was dumb because he was called before this panel and sat in front of the court and said, hey, why do I need to know all these trivial things? I just pick up the phone and I call and I have that. Yeah. That's what our clients need. Yeah. Is that a pick up a phone, or our potential clients to pick up the phone and call and say, I have a guy for that.
The smartest people are the people that understand that they don't know everything.
Exactly.
And they're willing to hire people to help them.
That's
what a good CEO does.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's exactly right.
Catch all the blind spots that are coming at you. Mm-hmm. And that can be done. And here's the interesting thing. The team that we've assembled at Modern Wealth Management to do that for what I call the millionaire next door is a new phenomenon. Ultra wealthy people get up to 30, 40, 50 million plus. They expect that their investment advisor, their certified financial planner, their insurance person, their tax person, their estate planning person are going to meet together with that individual at least a couple of times a year to make sure that everybody is clear on the vision. Mm-hmm. They expect it. Yeah. The millionaire next door not only doesn't expect it, they don't even know that it exists.
Right.
Which is what
or that they need it.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference.
It makes a very big difference. Is that we sat with a lot of clients that come on board and they're like, I had no idea I needed all of this in one room.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and what a difference it makes because everybody's on the same page.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So as we head into 2024, I want to encourage all of our viewers that are watching the Guided Retirement Show on YouTube, everybody that's listening to us on the podcast, make sure you subscribe. If you're on YouTube, make sure you click the bell icon. Share this with your friends and continue to join us here on the Guided Retirement Show. And then also check out our America's Wealth Management Show, which we have a new episode release every Monday and every Thursday, both on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. You'll find Chris Rett with me again next year. Chris, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Dean.
Absolutely. Good to have you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us on the Guided Retirement Show. We will be back with you January 2024.
Starting your route to retirement.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to leave a comment and share this episode with your friends.
Investment advisory services offered through Modern Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.